Alright, here's the deal. I'm not the kind of guy who buys into dumb urban legends. Spooky stories, ghosts, disappearances, those bullshit tales older folks whisper about on cold winter nights to scare the crap out of kids. Yeah, no thanks. But sometimes life screws you over so hard that you find yourself driving alone through the creepiest tunnel on the East Coast at 3 a.m., questioning every damn decision you've ever made. The Black Hollow Tunnel, a whole mile of pitch-black nothingness, but who's counting when every second feels like an eternity? It's buried deep in the ass end of West Virginia, where time froze somewhere in the 70s, and the locals glare at you like you've pissed on their lawn the moment you pull up to a gas station. Weird place. Always had stories following it, driving through the tunnel, some unexplainable shit happening, people disappearing. But come on, who actually believes that crap? Well, apparently I was dumb enough to end up there. I was driving to Pittsburgh for this big-ass job interview, some journalism gig I'd been chasing for 2 years. Honestly, I was already hanging by a thread. To cut time, I took some shitty local road and suddenly, there was that tunnel. There was no turning back. The only way to continue was through it. I started driving. The first sign something was off. The sound. You know how a tunnel usually sounds, like your car's echoing all around you. Here. Nothing. Just dead silence. Like someone swallowed all the sound in the world. Every now and then I'd hear my tires skimming over the concrete, but that was it. I gripped the steering wheel tighter because, I'm not gonna lie, it felt wrong. Something wasn't right. The headlights on my old Chevy barely cut through the blackness, 10, maybe 15 feet ahead, and behind me? A goddamn void. No lights, no exit. I could feel the sweat pooling at the back of my neck. I tried to turn on the radio, just to break the silence, but all I got was that static hiss, like someone trying to tune in from another dimension. And then, I saw her. She was standing there, right at the edge of the tunnel. You know that split second when your brain freezes because it can't process what you're seeing? That's exactly what happened. It was a woman. Long black hair, a white dress trailing along the concrete. She looked. I don't know how to explain it. Unreal. Like she didn't belong there. Reflexively, I hit the brakes, because, come on, you don't just drive past someone standing in the middle of a tunnel at 3 a.m. I rolled down my window and called out, "Hey! You need help?" She turned her head toward me. Her face. I still can't describe it. She was beautiful, but there was something wrong. Her eyes were dark. Too dark. Like there was nothing in them. "Can I get a ride?" she asked softly. Her voice was a whisper, but somehow, I heard it perfectly clear. I'm telling you, every instinct I had screamed at me to hit the gas and get the hell out of there. But I didn't. I nodded like an idiot and said, "Get in." And she did. The door closed almost silently, and she slid into the passenger seat. She smelled weird, nothing like perfume, more like old books and cold earth. She just stared straight ahead while I tried to keep my shit together. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to sound normal. She didn't answer right away. Then, in that same quiet voice, she said, "To the end of the tunnel. You know that feeling when your stomach does a complete somersault?" "Yeah, that." But what was I supposed to do? We weren't even halfway through. I kept driving, and she just sat there, still as a statue. "Do you want me to read your palm?" she asked suddenly. I jumped. "What? To read your palm? I know a lot about you." I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding like crazy. But I held out my hand, more out of fear than curiosity. Her fingers were ice cold. She traced my palm, looked at it, and then she smiled. It was a beautiful smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You've made a lot of mistakes, Elliot," she whispered. "But your biggest one is still coming." I yanked my hand back. What the hell does that mean? She didn't answer. She just kept staring ahead. The tunnel still stretched on forever. I drove, but the feeling that something was off only got worse. I couldn't take it anymore. Who the hell are you? I shouted, glancing at her. But the passenger seat was empty. I slammed on the brakes, tires screeching across the concrete. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I looked around, but there was no one. Just me, my car, and the goddamn tunnel. Then I looked in the rearview mirror. She was standing behind my car. Her white dress dragged across the concrete, and her dark eyes stared straight into mine. She didn't move. She just stood there. I floored it out of that tunnel. I don't even remember how I got out. All I know is that when I burst through to the other side, it was daylight. Bright daylight, even though I'd entered that tunnel at 3 in the morning. And her voice. Her words still echo in my head. Your biggest mistake is still coming. Chapter 2, The Price of Curiosity. You know how people always say, don't go looking for trouble. Well, that's what I did, and trust me, trouble found me in ways I couldn't even imagine. I got to Pittsburgh for that interview, and yeah, let's just say it didn't go well. But that's not the worst part. I mean, the job wasn't the thing eating at me. It was the fact that I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, was still lurking in my rearview mirror. I couldn't stop thinking about the damn tunnel. And that woman. Every time I tried to push it out of my head, it came back like a bad song you can't get rid of. So, I did what any half-decent idiot would do, I went to a bar. I needed to drown my thoughts, numb the constant buzzing in my head. You know, just another night of bad decisions. The bartender looked at me like he knew exactly what I was about to do. He didn't say anything at first, just poured me a drink, slid it down the bar like it was his job to get me drunk enough to spill my guts. You ever heard of Black Hollow Tunnel? He asked, not even looking at me. I stopped mid-sip. Yeah, I've heard of it. His eyes narrowed, like he was deciding if he should tell me the story or just let me be another fool who didn't know what he was getting into. Finally, he leaned in, his voice low. Let me tell you something, kid. People who go through that tunnel don't come out the same. Some of them don't come out at all. I laughed, because honestly, what else was I supposed to do? You're shitting me, right? He didn't crack a smile. Some say it's haunted, some say it's cursed, but me. I think it's something worse. Something older than all of us. I shook my head, dismissing it as more of that small-town bullshit. But you know what? That didn't stop me from thinking about it the whole damn night. And that's how you end up in the mess I was in. The kind of mess where you know better but do it anyway. The next night, I couldn't sleep. I kept waking up at 3 a.m., sweating like a damn pig. The dreams? Don't even get me started. I kept seeing her, her eyes, her smile, her voice. That goddamn whisper in my ear, your biggest mistake is still coming. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to go back. Stupid? Absolutely. But that's what you do when you're too curious for your own good. I found myself back at the entrance to Black Hollow Tunnel. The sun had barely set, but the air felt thick. Like it was holding its breath. And there she was. Standing at the mouth of the tunnel. Same white dress, same black hair, same dead-eyed stare. You again? I said, trying to keep my cool. But, man, I could feel the fear crawling up my spine. What the hell do you want? She didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, staring at me like I was some bug she was deciding whether to squish or not. Then, finally, she spoke. I've been waiting for you. My blood ran cold. For me? What the hell do you mean? Her smile twisted. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't friendly. It was wrong. You came back. You made a choice, and now you have to live with it. I didn't know what she was talking about, but I sure as hell wasn't sticking around to find out. I turned and tried to walk away, but something stopped me. Something heavy, like the tunnel was pulling at me, trying to drag me in. And I heard it again, the whisper. Only this time, it wasn't in my ear. It was everywhere. Inside my head. You can't leave until you've paid the price. I froze. My heart was hammering. I knew I should have turned around, should have gotten the hell out of there. But curiosity. It's a bitch. And it made me turn around. So I did. And that's when shit got real. She was gone. Vanished, like she was never there. But the tunnel? It didn't feel like the same place. The air was thick with something dark, like the tunnel itself had come alive. The shadows shifted, and I swear I saw figures moving in the corners of my eyes. Faces twisted in pain, hands reaching out like they wanted to grab me and pull me into the darkness. And that's when I realized something. I had fucked up. Big time. I ran to my car, slammed the door shut, and gunned it. Tires screeching, engine roaring, but the feeling didn't go away. I couldn't shake it. The weight on my chest. The cold sweat. And every time I looked in the rearview mirror, there she was, standing in the middle of the road, her eyes dark, her smile stretching wide. I sped up, but I couldn't outrun it. The road blurred, the trees flew by, but that feeling was right there, breathing down my neck. Finally, when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I glanced in the mirror again. She was gone. I didn't stop until I hit the city, but I knew something for sure, I wasn't free. I'd crossed some line I didn't understand, and now, there was no going back. You think you can control everything, right? That you can just roll through life and nothing will catch up to you. But here's the thing they don't tell you, some choices will haunt you. Forever. So, here's the lesson. If you ever find yourself staring down the mouth of a dark tunnel, with nothing but shadows ahead of you, ask yourself one thing, is this worth it? Because once you walk through, you might not like what you find on the other side. And some things don't let you leave. I've gotta tell you, I never thought I'd be caught up in something like this. But here I am, sitting in front of this goddamn house, wondering how the hell I got here. The thing's been abandoned for years, but you wouldn't know it by looking at it now. It's all covered in overgrown vines and looks like it's been through hell and back. It's sitting on the edge of a cliff, and if you stand on the porch, you can see the sea stretch out forever, all the way to the horizon. Beautiful, right? Until you know what happened here. This house wasn't always like this. Back in the day, it was the crown jewel of the place, a mansion that everyone talked about. But that was before 2002, when the fire hit. People say it started small, a little spark from a broken electrical line, but by the time anyone could do anything about it, the flames had already eaten up the whole damn thing. The house went down in a blaze, and with it, a whole bunch of people's dreams. But here's where things get weird. The town had been waiting for years for the place to be rebuilt, and when they finally started the work, that's when shit started happening. I'm not talking about normal stuff, like contractors complaining about broken tools or whatever. No, I mean weird. First, there was this freaking tornado, but not just any tornado. It tore through the place, ripping off roofs and breaking trees in half, but for some goddamn reason, it missed this house. The whole neighborhood got hit, but the house was untouched. That should have been a sign, but no one cared enough to listen. Then came the owners. First, a guy bought it, tried to fix it up, but he started getting sick. Doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. He died a few months later, just like that. No one really questioned it because, well, it's a small town, and people get sick. But then the next guy who bought it, Same damn thing. Sick as hell, no answers, dead in under a year. The third guy was even worse. He was driving to the house one night when he crashed his car, right on the way here. No one knew exactly how it happened, but they said the brakes failed. The guy died on impact. After that, people just stopped coming around. The house sat there, untouched for years, just waiting for someone else to make the mistake of trying to fix it. And then, that summer, it happened. Two tourists, a couple of dumbasses, decided to go hiking around the area. I don't know what the hell they were thinking, but they ended up stuck in the storm and took shelter in the house. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, the storm got worse. Lightning started striking all around, and then, bam. One bolt hit the house, and those two were gone in an instant. It's been a while since I've been back here. After everything I saw, I thought I'd never set foot near that place again. But you know how it goes, curiosity kills the cat, or whatever the saying is. The thing is, people don't just forget about a house like that. There's always someone who thinks they're brave enough to check it out, even after everything that's happened. That's exactly what happened this time. A local guy, let's call him Mark, decided he was gonna do what no one else dared. Now, Mark wasn't some dumb tourist or a curious kid. He knew about the house, heard the stories, and still thought he could get away with it. His plan? He was gonna sneak into the house with his, well, let's just say his friend, a woman he didn't want anyone else to know about. His wife, of course, had no idea, but he didn't care. He had something to hide, and that house was perfect for it. Mark and his friend, let's call her Lisa, thought they could sneak in, mess around for a bit, and then leave before anyone knew they were there. No harm, no foul. But they couldn't have been more wrong. It was a cold, rainy night when they decided to make their move. The storm was heavy, the wind howling outside, but that's exactly what they thought would cover their tracks. They crept into the house like it was just another abandoned building, but I could feel it, the same chill I'd felt the first time I stood in front of it. Something was off. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I could feel it in my gut. Inside, the house was a mess. Dust everywhere, broken furniture, and those weird creaking sounds that you only get in places that have been left alone for way too long. But Mark and Lisa didn't care. They found a place to sit down, start talking, doing whatever it was they were doing, completely ignoring the atmosphere of the house. That's when it started. At first, it was small. A few sounds, almost like someone was moving around in the next room. Mark brushed it off. "It's just the wind," he said. But I knew. I knew better than to think it was just the wind. The place had a life of its own, and it wasn't friendly. Then came the laughter. Low, echoing, like a party was going on somewhere deep inside the house. Lisa looked at Mark, her eyes wide. She asked if he heard it, but he tried to play it cool. "It's probably just the house settling," he said. But deep down, he knew something wasn't right. The laughter grew louder. It wasn't just random. It sounded like people, having a good time. It was too clear, too real. But there was no one there. No one except Mark and Lisa. And then, just like that, the door slammed shut. The entire house shook. Mark jumped up, swearing under his breath, grabbing Lisa's hand. "We're out of here," he said. But the door wouldn't open. It was like the house had decided it wasn't done with them yet. They were trapped. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the door gave way, and they bolted out of the house like their lives depended on it. The rain was coming down hard, and the wind was brutal. They ran for their cars, but the terror wasn't over yet. As they drove back towards town, the storm hit harder. Thunder cracked in the distance, and just when they thought they might be out of the woods, boom, a massive strike of lightning hit the rock above the house, sending a chunk of it tumbling down the hill. The rocks landed right on their cars. I don't even need to tell you what happened next. They were both dead on the spot. The cars were totaled, and the storm didn't give a damn. I can't help but wonder if the house is cursed, or if there's something else going on here. Maybe it's the sea, the storm, or something in the ground. I don't know. But I do know one thing, whatever it is, it's been here for a long time, and it's not going anywhere. I've heard the stories. Hell, we all have. But the one that sticks with me is the one about the 3 women. Some of the old-timers say they can still hear their voices, crying out from the walls. Native American women, tortured and killed by some officer who thought he could get away with it. People say their spirits are still in the house, trapped, screaming for revenge. I don't know if I believe that shit, but when you're standing in front of that house, you can't help but feel something. Like you're not alone. Anyway, I don't know what's going to happen next. But I'm telling you, if you ever find yourself near this place, don't even think about going inside. It's not worth it. Trust me. You don't want to be the next one to get sucked into whatever the hell is going on in there. There's barely anyone in Salem's Hollow who doesn't know this story since they were kids. In the village, deep in the middle of nowhere, back in the 19th century, there lived a man named Hiram Blackwood. This guy was so damn terrifying that just thinking about him would send cold sweat down your spine. And no, he wasn't just some asshole who could threaten you with a stick, he was, apparently, a vampire. Now, I know what you're thinking. A vampire? In the 19th century? Sounds like some stupid fairy tale, right? But the folks in this village swore by it. The story goes like this: Hiram Blackwood supposedly lived all the way up until 1957. And that's when the real shit started. The villagers buried him, but, of course, that didn't stop him. He wasn't done. Every damn night, he'd rise from the grave like some freaking dead man walking, just to terrorize them. I remember old Bob, who I knew when he was still alive, talking about how Hiram would knock on doors and windows every damn night. Can you imagine that? Someone knocking on your door, but you can't see them, and you just hear that knock, knock, knock. That sound alone would send chills down your spine. And it didn't stop there. He'd blow out their lanterns, snuff out candles, and blow smoke back down their chimneys. Can you even imagine that? Some bastard sends the smoke right back down your chimney while you're just watching, helpless. He'd knock over pots, flip shit all over the place. What the hell was that supposed to mean? But the worst part? He'd go to his wife, his widow, who had been left alone after his death. They say every night he'd come back to her and rape her. Hell, they even said there were orgies, that people just disappeared. Freakin' terrifying, right? A guy dies, but he comes back and does even worse shit. When everyone thought there was no hope left, the villagers decided to take matters into their own hands. They started digging. I don't know, man, can you imagine those damn nights when everyone would grab axes and stakes and head to the cemetery? They were just waiting to find him, and when they did, they tried to stake him through the heart with a hawthorn stake. But nothing. Hiram stayed alive. Or at least, it looked that way. Then they cut off his head. Yeah, you heard that right, cut his damn head off. I thought, for sure, that would be the end of it. But no. That didn't stop him either. Nothing could stop him. But here's the real kicker. Even after they thought they'd gotten rid of him, people in the village still talk about strange things happening. And that's where the story starts to get weird. Because after his head was chopped off, something kept happening. Doors would open by themselves, shadows would move in the corner of your eye, and some say they still hear footsteps at night. And if you ask anyone in the village, they'll tell you, the Hollow House isn't done with him yet. Even after Hiram Blackwood's body was desecrated, the curse of Salem's Hollow didn't end. The villagers thought they had put an end to it when they buried him, but the strange events continued, and people still whisper about that house on the hill. The one that no one dares go near. You can't even find it on a map anymore, no one wants to. They say the house itself holds something more than just Hiram's restless spirit. Some believe it's a doorway, a place where evil doesn't just live, it waits. You ever hear about something so damn creepy that you get chills just from hearing it? That's how the stories go. Old Martha, the one who's lived here her whole life, swears that something even darker took over after Hiram died. She tells a story about how, even after the villagers chopped his head off and buried him in the graveyard, they could still hear things. At first, it was small stuff, windows slamming shut when there was no wind, strange sounds in the night. Then it got worse. People would wake up to find their doors open, or their things moved. Nothing big, but enough to make you think twice about stepping out your door after dark. It's the way the villagers talk about it that gets to you. The fear in their voices when they mention the house, the way they quickly change the subject if you ask too many questions. There's this one old guy, Jim, who claims he saw a light flickering in the window of the house late at night, even though there's no electricity out there. But when he went up there, the house was dark. Empty. Not a soul inside. The scariest part of all this? It's the way the villagers talk about Hiram's widow. People say she's the one who cursed the house. You know, she was the one who was tormented by him every night after his death, and it was her pain, her rage, that bound Hiram to that place. Some say she did some kind of ritual, something dark and twisted, before she died. No one really knows, but it's that same rage, that grief, that keeps the house tied to the curse. And here's the thing, no one's ever been brave enough to go inside. Not even the bravest souls in the village. No one dares. People swear that if you step foot in that house, you're signing up for a lifetime of bad luck. Or worse. And it's not just superstition. The ones who have tried. They either leave and never speak of it again, or, well, they don't come back. The house itself? It's still there. But you'd never know it unless you were close enough to hear the wind howling through the broken windows. The walls are covered in ivy, and the door hangs half open like it's waiting for someone to walk through. But the people of Salem's Hollow know better. They know what happens to those who go looking for answers. You don't mess with things you don't understand. And they understand this, that house is cursed, and nothing good can come from stepping inside it. There's one story that stuck with me. It's about a guy named Henry, who moved to the village about a decade ago. He was a skeptic, said he didn't believe in ghosts or curses. He was convinced the whole thing was just some village myth, some creepy tale passed down over generations. So one night, after drinking a bit too much, Henry made a bet with some of the locals. He'd go into the house, spend an hour there, and prove to everyone that there was nothing to be afraid of. Well, he went in. No one saw him come out. The next morning, they found his truck still parked at the edge of the road. But Henry? Nowhere to be found. The villagers never saw him again. Some say he ran off, but no one believes that. No one in Salem's Hollow ever really leaves. So the way I see it, Henry didn't run. He's just another part of the curse now. I don't know about you, but I'm not looking to find out what happens when you mess with a curse that's been around for over a century. There's a reason people don't talk about the house anymore. And if you ask me, that's the way it should stay. There's a building in the heart of City Heights, one of those places you drive by and try not to stare at for too long. It's one of those old, crumbling towers where the paint on the walls peels like it's been begging to leave for years. The place smells like stale air and missed opportunities. People who live there have their stories, but there's one in particular that sticks with you. You don't hear it from everyone, but when you do, you can't shake it. It's about apartment 306. Now, let me tell you right off the bat, this isn't just some random spooky tale you tell around a campfire. Nah, this is real shit. You see, apartment 306 has this vibe that messes with your head. Everyone who's ever tried to rent it never stays. They last a week, 2 weeks max, then they're gone, and nobody ever hears from them again. Not one person has managed to stick it out. I'm not talking about the usual shit you hear in bad neighborhoods, like loud neighbors or leaky pipes. I'm talking about the feeling that someone's always watching you, even when you're alone. That's what happens the second you step inside. You get this cold, creeping sensation that hits you straight in the chest, like something is standing right behind you. It's weird, man. The walls. They're colder than anywhere else in the building. The heat doesn't seem to reach this place, no matter what. You can't explain it, but it's like the apartment has its own atmosphere, like it's trapped in a different time. People who've stayed in 306 say they can hear footsteps at night, heavy and slow, moving from room to room. But when they check, the apartment's empty. Nothing there. Now, there's something even darker about the whole thing. Years ago, there was a guy who lived in that same apartment. No one remembers his name, but they say he just disappeared. Vanished into thin air. One day, he was there, and the next, poof, gone. But that's not the crazy part. What's really fucked up is what he left behind. You see, there was a stain on the wall. Not a small one, either. It was big, dark, and no matter how many times they tried to repaint the damn thing, it never went away. Like it was part of the place now. Like it belonged there. So, people moved in, tried to make the best of it. But every one of them either moved out in a hurry or just up and left without saying a word. It was like the place was cursed, or maybe, something didn't want them there. It wasn't until the Martin family came in that things really started to get weird. The Martins were new to City Heights, fresh faces, just trying to make it. They had a kid, a little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old. Cute kid, didn't seem like anything was off at first. But then, it started. One night, the parents were in the kitchen, cooking dinner, when they heard their son talking. Now, he was always talking to himself, so it wasn't anything too strange at first. But when they walked into the living room to check on him, the kid was standing by the wall, just chatting away like someone was there. But here's the kicker, he wasn't looking at anything. No one was there. When they asked him who he was talking to, he turned to them with that serious look only a kid can have and said, "I'm talking to the man by the window." Thing is, there's no window in that room. The parents laughed it off at first. Maybe he had an imaginary friend, right? Kids do that. But then, the kid started talking more about the man by the window, getting specific about what he looked like. The weirdest part. The kid swore the man was always there, standing in the same spot, staring out at something only he could see. The Martin family lasted only 2 weeks before they packed up and left, without so much as a goodbye. I don't know what they saw, but it was enough to get them the hell out of there. And you know what? That's not even the most fucked up part. The most messed up part. No one's ever figured out what happened to that guy who disappeared. The guy who lived there before. The one with the stain on the wall. And you know what they say. Some things never really leave, no matter how hard you try to paint over them. To this day, no one stays in apartment 306 for long. The stories keep coming, like whispers in the dark. And no matter how many times they repaint the walls or change the locks, something stays there. Something that doesn't want to be forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, it's waiting for someone else to move in. So, by now you're probably thinking, okay, that's creepy, but what's the big deal? Just some messed up stories, right? Well, let me tell you something. This shit doesn't stop with just a couple of weird noises or creepy kids talking to invisible men. There's a price to pay for stepping into that apartment, and it's more than just losing a few weeks of your life. It's your mind. It's your soul. The Martins weren't the only ones to get out of there fast. No, man, there's been a whole string of people who've come and gone, like they were just swallowed up by the place. You start to wonder, is it the apartment? Or is it the curse that's been hanging around since that guy disappeared? No one really knows, but I'll tell you this, apartment 306 doesn't take no for an answer. It's like a trap, but not one you can see. It gets under your skin, makes you think you're crazy, and just when you think you're about to break free, it pulls you back in. Now, here's where it gets really fucked up. People who've spent enough time there start to lose track of themselves. They get these flashes. Moments when they can't tell if they're awake or dreaming. The air in that apartment feels thick, like it's pressing down on you, and the longer you stay, the harder it is to breathe. It's like you're trapped in some weird loop, where time doesn't really move, and nothing feels real anymore. That's when you know it's not just the apartment playing tricks on you. You see, that stain on the wall. People thought it was just some messed up thing that wouldn't come off. But what if it's more than that? What if it's not just paint or dirt? What if it's something deeper, something tied to the man who vanished all those years ago? People who've stared at it for too long say it starts to change. It gets bigger, darker, and then, just when you think it's about to consume you, everything goes quiet. And that's when you hear it. You're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking maybe you've finally gotten used to the place. But then, out of nowhere, you hear footsteps again. Slow. Steady. Coming from the other room. You tell yourself it's nothing, that it's just your mind playing tricks. But then the door creaks open. And you feel it, the air gets colder, like someone standing right behind you. You don't dare look, because you know if you do, you'll see something you're not supposed to. You can feel it, right? That cold breath on the back of your neck. But the scariest part? It's not just the footsteps. It's what happens next. A while back, there was a guy named Kyle who tried to tough it out. He didn't believe in any of the ghost stories. He wasn't some scared little bitch. He was tough, man. Lived on the edge. But after a few nights in apartment 306, he started seeing things. He'd hear whispers, but when he turned around, there was no one there. Then one night, he swore he saw someone standing in the corner of the room. He couldn't make out their face, but he could feel their eyes on him. He tried to leave, but the door wouldn't open. The knob just wouldn't turn. It was like the place had locked him in. And that's when it clicked. That's when Kyle realized the truth. The apartment doesn't just want you to leave. It wants you to stay. It doesn't let go once it's got its claws in you. And it gets worse the longer you stay. You start to lose your mind. Your thoughts aren't your own anymore. You hear things, see things that aren't there. And then you become part of the story. Part of the legend. By the time Kyle left, he wasn't the same. He didn't even look like the same guy. His eyes were hollow, like he had seen something that broke him. He didn't talk about what happened. Hell, he didn't even talk to anyone for weeks. He just vanished, just like the man before him. That's the thing about apartment 306. It doesn't just claim your body. It claims your mind, too. And the more you fight it, the deeper it digs in. You don't leave there the same. You can't. But maybe that's the point. Maybe it's not about leaving. Maybe it's about staying. Maybe it's about being trapped in a place that's just as lost as you are. So, here's the lesson. If you ever find yourself standing in front of apartment 306, wondering if you should go in, ask yourself one question: what's more terrifying? The idea of what's inside, or the idea of what happens if you don't go in? And if you still decide to step through that door, well, just know this: there's a price for everything. And in apartment 306, the price is steep. So, there I was, sitting on the couch, half watching TV, when my 4-year-old son looks up at me like he's about to drop some serious wisdom. He asks, "Mom, do you remember when you were small and I was big? We ate by the river, remember?" I blinked, like, what the hell? He was barely able to tie his own shoes, and here he was, talking like we'd shared a moment from some past life. I looked at him, trying to make sense of what he said. "What the hell are you talking about, kid?" I asked. But he just stared at me, his little face all serious, like he was waiting for me to get it. I couldn't remember anything like that. Hell, I could barely remember what I ate for lunch yesterday, and now he's talking about us eating by the river when he was big and I was small. Nah, something didn't add up. He couldn't possibly remember something like that. It was insane. I tried to shake it off, thinking it was just some random kid thing. You know, kids say weird stuff sometimes. But then, it hit me. My dad used to take me to the river when I was his age. We'd sit there, by the water, just eating our sandwiches and watching the ripples. That was a thing for me. But that was years ago. My son wasn't even born when I used to do that with my dad. I couldn't stop thinking about it. How did he know? I didn't even talk about the river. Not since I was a kid. And yet, here he was, talking like it was some shared memory. I had no idea what to make of it, but something in my gut told me this wasn't just a coincidence. I needed answers. I couldn't just let this slide. I couldn't let it go. So, I decided to visit my mom. Maybe she knew something. Maybe she'd heard something, anything that could explain this crazy memory my kid seemed to have. I needed to talk to someone, figure out what the hell was going on in my head. When I walked into her place, she was in the kitchen, like always. Making coffee, acting like nothing was strange in the world. But this time, I wasn't here for small talk. I had to ask. "Mom," I said, trying to sound casual, but my heart was racing. "Do you remember Grandpa taking me to the river when I was a kid?" She stopped what she was doing and gave me a look. I couldn't tell if she was thinking or just trying to figure out why I was asking. After a second, she said, "Yeah, of course, I remember. He loved that river. Took you there every summer. Did he ever talk about it? Like, was there something weird about it? Or did he just like it?" She paused, her eyes narrowing like she was remembering something. "Well, yeah. There were always stories, you know. People said the river had something. Something that pulled you in. Made you feel like you belonged there. But your grandpa never really talked about it. He just loved it. Said it was peaceful. Never said anything weird about it, though." I wasn't sure if she was avoiding the question or if she honestly didn't know what I was getting at, but her words hit me like a ton of bricks. People said the river had something. What the hell does that mean? She looked at me like I was asking too many questions. "It's just stories, honey. Nothing to worry about. People disappear by rivers sometimes, you know. But your grandpa didn't care about that stuff. He just liked being there with you." I felt a cold chill go down my spine. Disappearances. Stories. What the hell was going on here? I didn't want to keep pushing, so I left. But as I walked out of her house, my head was spinning. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. Something big. My son's words kept echoing in my head. The river, the memory, how he seemed to know something that never happened. I drove back home, not sure if I was going crazy or if there was something deeper at play here. But one thing was for sure, I couldn't just forget about it. I had to figure this out. Days passed, and I couldn't stop thinking about that damn river. I kept driving by it, sitting there, staring at the water like it would give me some kind of answer. But nothing happened. It was just a river, flowing like it always had. There was no sign of anything unusual. No sign of my dad. No sign of any damn mystery. And then one day, my son asked me again, in that same quiet voice, "Do you remember when I was big, and you were small? By the river?" I stared at him, my heart pounding. He was still only 4 years old. But he was asking the same question. The same thing, over and over. Was this some kind of joke? A game? Or was he trying to tell me something I couldn't understand? I didn't know. But I realized something. No matter how much I wanted answers, no matter how many times I went to the river or talked to my mom, there were no answers to be found. The river didn't give a damn about my questions. The past didn't care about my confusion. Some things, some memories, just weren't meant to be understood. So, I stopped asking. I stopped going to the river. I stopped trying to figure out why my son kept talking about it. Some mysteries aren't for us to solve. And maybe, just maybe, that's how it's supposed to be. There's something about life that doesn't always make sense. Some things just happen, and we're left to deal with them however we can. Sometimes the past and the present collide in ways we can't explain, and we have to accept that. And maybe that's the lesson here. Some questions don't have answers. And that's okay. I'm telling you, man, this shit was weird. I went to bed like I always do, not thinking about much. Maybe the usual stuff, work, some random shit on my mind. But I woke up feeling off. Like, I didn't even know what the hell just happened. I had this dream, right? But it wasn't just some regular dream. Nah, it was way too real. I was talking to Jake, my cousin, someone I haven't seen in years. We were just chatting like nothing had changed. Like we never stopped talking. He looked the same, sounded the same. Hell, it even felt like he was in the room with me. We were talking about stuff, random shit, nothing special, but it felt important, you know? Like it was supposed to mean something. And then I woke up. Boom. Like that. I laid there for a minute, trying to shake it off. But the feeling didn't go away. It was like his voice was still in my head, and the weirdest thing was, we talked about the same stuff in the dream that I've been thinking about lately. About how things have been going, what we've been up to. It was like he knew what was going on in my life. But that's impossible, right? We haven't spoken in forever. I thought maybe I was just tripping, maybe it was just some weird coincidence. But it felt way too real. And I couldn't get rid of it. That damn dream kept replaying in my head. Every time I tried to focus on something else, it came back. Jake's face. His voice. Everything. The weirdest part. That afternoon, I get a call. My phone rings, and I'm thinking it's just another spam call or something. But nah, it's Jake. Out of nowhere. I hadn't heard from him in years, and now he's calling me like we're old buddies. My heart starts racing, and I don't even know why. Maybe it's because of that damn dream, or maybe it's just the fact that this shit was too strange to be a coincidence. I pick up, and he's asking me if I remember what we talked about in the dream. That's when I felt the blood drain from my face. It was the exact same conversation. Word for word. The same topics. The same feeling. I was losing my mind. What the hell was going on? How could this be real? It didn't make sense. How the hell could I have dreamt something, and then he calls me up about it like it's some kind of déjà vu? I couldn't explain it. I didn't want to explain it. All I knew was that it didn't feel right. It wasn't a coincidence. It was too damn weird. I hung up the phone and sat there, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of what just happened. My mind was racing, but I couldn't get anywhere. It was like I was stuck in a loop. I couldn't tell if I was awake or still dreaming. All I knew was that I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was going on. Something I couldn't understand. I tried to brush it off. Told myself I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. I had to figure out what the hell this all meant. Because I had a feeling this wasn't the last time Jake and I would be crossing paths. Not by a long shot. I couldn't shake the feeling, man. That call, that damn conversation with Jake, kept gnawing at me. It wasn't just a weird coincidence. It was like something bigger was at play. Something that didn't make sense, and I hated not understanding it. I've never been the type to get caught up in some spiritual nonsense, but this felt different. Like I was in the middle of some crazy story that I didn't even ask for. I tried to push it out of my mind, but it kept coming back. Every damn time I closed my eyes, I saw Jake's face. I could hear his voice like it was still echoing in my ears. The whole day was just off. I kept looking over my shoulder, like someone was watching me, like something was about to happen, and I had no control over it. That night, I went to bed hoping to just forget it all. Just get some damn sleep and wake up like nothing ever happened. But I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, the same dream started to creep in again. The conversation. The same damn conversation we'd had earlier, only this time it was different. It was like it wasn't a dream at all. It felt more like a memory. A memory that hadn't happened yet. I woke up in a cold sweat. My heart was pounding, and I couldn't breathe. What the hell was going on? Why was this happening? I wasn't the type to freak out, but this was pushing me to the edge. I was trapped in some loop I couldn't escape from. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. It was 3 a.m. Everything was silent. Too silent. But then, the phone rang again. Same number. Jake's number. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen for a second, my mind racing. I wasn't sure what to do. Was I dreaming again? Was this real? It didn't make sense. But I couldn't just ignore it. I picked up, not knowing what the hell to expect. Jake didn't say much at first. He just asked me if I was okay. He didn't even sound like himself, man. It was like he knew something I didn't. It was like he was reading my mind, but in a way that made my skin crawl. He kept saying the same thing, "Are you sure you're alright?" What the hell was he talking about? Was I alright? Of course, I wasn't. I felt like I was losing my mind. But I didn't want to tell him that. I didn't want to sound crazy. Then, he dropped a bomb on me. He told me he'd been having the same dream. The same damn dream we'd had together. Word for word, the same conversation. It was like we were both living in the same twisted reality. Like we were trapped in some shared experience that we couldn't escape. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't even think straight. This was too much. It didn't make sense. I asked him how the hell this could be possible, but he didn't have an answer. He just said it felt like we were supposed to talk about it. Like it was some kind of sign. I hung up again, my hands shaking. I sat there, staring at the phone in disbelief. What the hell was happening? I didn't know what to believe anymore. Was it all in my head? Was it just some weird coincidence? Or was something else going on? Something bigger than both of us? I couldn't let it go. I needed to know what the hell was happening. But no matter how hard I tried to make sense of it, the answers weren't coming. I kept thinking about what Jake had said. It's like we're supposed to talk about it. What did that even mean? Why did it feel like the universe was forcing us to relive this moment? And why did it feel like I was the only one who didn't get it? I stayed up all night, tossing and turning, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. But I didn't get any answers. The only thing I knew for sure was that something was happening. Something that neither of us could explain. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to know the truth anymore. I may never know exactly what it all meant, but at this point, it didn't matter. Because sometimes, things aren't meant to be understood. They're just there. And we have to learn to live with that. Without the need for everything to make sense. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and for once, I didn't want to know more. It was around 2 a.m. when I had to carry him again. The same routine, night after night. My son had always been a restless sleeper, so I had become accustomed to this. For 3 years, I'd been carrying him from the bathroom to his bedroom after he'd stumbled through the night's routine. It wasn't a big deal, until tonight. Something felt off tonight. I didn't know what it was, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right in the house. The silence was thicker than usual. The house creaked and groaned like it always did, but tonight it felt different. The kind of difference that pricks at your skin and makes you check the locks twice before going to bed. I walked down the hallway with my son in my arms, his little body heavy and warm against me. As I passed the door to our bedroom, I glanced in, just for a second. And that's when I saw it. Or at least, that's when I thought I saw it. I could have sworn I saw a figure sitting on the edge of the bed. A person, or what looked like a person, sitting still in the dim light. But I immediately dismissed it. Shadows, maybe. My eyes were playing tricks on me. I was tired, that was all. Nothing more. I kept walking, focusing on the task at hand, getting my son into bed and making sure he was settled for the night. The last thing I wanted to do was start second-guessing myself, especially with him in my arms. But as I stepped into the bedroom, I felt the unease settle deeper into my bones. I didn't look back at the bed right away, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, just like they always do when something feels wrong. It was like I could feel the weight of the room shift, the air turning thicker, more oppressive. I laid my son gently in his bed, pulling the covers up to his chin. He mumbled something incoherent, his eyes barely open, and I took a moment to watch him settle. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Or maybe it was the room itself. I don't know. I turned back toward the door, planning to leave the room. That's when I heard my son's voice, clear and calm, cutting through the stillness. "Dad, who's the old man sitting on your bed?" I froze. For a moment, my brain didn't register what he had said. My body tensed, the blood rushing to my face. I turned slowly, my heart racing. I didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do. I looked at my son. He wasn't looking at me. His eyes were fixed on the bed, and his little finger was pointing directly at the spot where I had thought I saw someone. But there was nothing there. Just the bed, the empty room. My mouth went dry. "What did you say?" He didn't look at me, his gaze still fixed on the spot. "The old man. He's sitting on your bed, Dad. Why isn't he moving?" I tried to swallow, but my throat was tight. I glanced at the bed again, searching for something, anything, that could explain this. But there was nothing. The room was exactly as it should be. Nothing out of place. Nothing to indicate that there was anyone sitting on the bed. I looked back at my son. He was still staring at the same spot, completely unaware of how his words were sinking into me. "Buddy," I said, my voice coming out quieter than I intended. "There's no one there. You're just tired. Go to sleep." He didn't respond. His eyes didn't leave the spot on the bed. It was like he wasn't even listening to me. He was just staring. I stood there, trying to keep my calm. Maybe he had seen something in the dark, maybe he was just confused, but it didn't feel right. There was something unsettling about the way he said it. The certainty in his voice. As if he had seen something that I couldn't see. I stepped closer to the bed, my eyes scanning the room once more. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed darker now, the silence thicker. My own breath sounded loud in my ears. I reached for the light switch, flicking it on. The room flooded with bright light, but it didn't make me feel better. It just made everything feel too real. Still, nothing. The bed was empty. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding, trying to laugh it off. "It's nothing, buddy. You're just imagining things." But he wasn't responding. His eyes were wide open, still fixed on the same spot. I felt my pulse quicken. The unease I had felt earlier now turned into something else, something I couldn't explain. I needed to get out of there. I needed to take him out of the room and just leave. I needed to shake off this feeling that something was wrong. But the longer I stood there, the more I felt like I couldn't trust myself. I didn't want to be paranoid. I didn't want to be the kind of person who freaks out over nothing. But it was getting harder to ignore the feeling that something was off. I bent down to pick him up again, trying to stay calm. But as I lifted him, my son finally spoke again. "He's still there, Dad." The old man. My heart skipped a beat. I turned quickly, looking at the bed again. But it was just the same, empty, quiet. I swallowed hard, feeling my stomach drop. "Let's get you back to bed, buddy," I said, trying to force a smile, though my voice sounded strained. I left the room as quickly as I could, closing the door softly behind me. But the feeling lingered. I couldn't shake the thought of what my son had said. I didn't know if it was just his imagination running wild or if something deeper was at play. But I couldn't deny that something felt wrong. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure what to believe. I couldn't shake it off. No matter how much I tried to convince myself it was nothing, I felt it. That fucking heaviness. My mind kept circling back to the old man. To my son's words. I kept thinking about the way he said it, the way he pointed at the damn bed. The old man is sitting there. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I had been awake for hours now, just pacing around the house. The air was thick, like the walls were closing in. I couldn't focus. My son was watching TV in the other room, but I didn't hear anything he was saying. I wasn't even really there anymore. My thoughts were all over the place. My eyes kept darting toward the bedroom door. I hadn't gone back in there since last night. I had to check again, right? I had to make sure my mind wasn't just fucking with me. So, I walked toward the room. Slowly. I didn't want to go in. I didn't want to see anything, but I couldn't stop myself. Every step felt like it was leading me into something I wasn't ready for. I opened the door, and there it was again, the same fucking emptiness. The bed, perfectly made. Nothing. Not a damn thing out of place. I stood there for a second, just staring at it. My chest was tight. I wanted to breathe, but I couldn't. I turned around, about to walk away, when I heard my son's voice from the hallway. "Dad, the old man is back." I froze. He was standing there, in the doorway, staring at the bedroom. His eyes were wide, and his little hand was pointing toward the bed. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? He was too young to be messing with me. Too innocent to make shit up like that. But I couldn't, no, I wouldn't, let myself fall into whatever trap my mind was setting for me. It had to be a coincidence. It had to be. I pulled him back into the living room, away from the door. My mind was a fucking mess. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't figure out what was real anymore. I sat down, trying to calm myself. Trying to breathe. My son sat next to me, fiddling with his toy cars, as if nothing was wrong. As if nothing had happened. I stared at the TV, but I wasn't watching. My thoughts kept running in circles. What the hell was going on? Was I losing my mind? Was this some kind of breakdown? I didn't know. I couldn't tell anymore. But then, after a few minutes, my son spoke up again. "He's gone now, Dad." I looked at him, my stomach flipping. What the hell did that mean? What did he see that I couldn't? But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I didn't want to encourage it. I didn't want to get deeper into whatever was happening here. So, I just nodded and told him it was okay. That it was just his imagination. And that was it. The whole fucking thing just stopped. Just like that. It didn't happen again. Not once. Not a single time after that. And who the hell knows what it was? Was I losing it? Was it just some weird, one-time thing that my brain cooked up? Or was my son seeing something I couldn't? Honestly, I'll never know. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe it was nothing at all. But I've lived in this house for years now, and it hasn't happened again. Not once. It's just, weird, man. Really fucking weird. But whatever it was, it never came back. And for that, I'm thankful. Because I'm not sure I could handle it if it did. It's late. Fucking late. The road's empty, dark as shit, and I'm out here alone. I've been driving for hours, just me and the hum of the engine, my mind spinning like a broken record. The headlights cut through the night, but it feels like they're barely making a dent in the dark. You know that feeling when you're alone, and it feels like everything around you is watching? That's how it is right now. Something's off. I'm trying not to think about it. Trying to push the shit out of my head. But then, bam. A fucking branch. Just pops up in front of me, out of nowhere. Like it's trying to stop me, or some shit. I slam on the brakes. Tires screech, and the car jerks forward like I'm about to crash. I'm fucking shaking. My hands are gripping the wheel like it's the only thing keeping me from flying off the edge of the earth. I stop the car, my breath coming in sharp, quick bursts. I'm trying to calm down, but it's not working. It's too fucking quiet out here. Like the world's holding its breath, waiting for something. I don't know why I do it, but I open the door. The cold hits me hard, sharp against my skin. I look around. Nothing. Just trees, the kind of shit you see in those stupid horror movies. The wind's rustling through the leaves, and I swear I hear footsteps, but when I turn around, there's nothing. I feel stupid standing here. My heart's racing, and I'm about 2 seconds from getting back in the car and driving off, but I force myself to move. I step out onto the gravel, the crunch of it too loud in the silence. I look at the branch. It's just hanging there, like it was put there on purpose. Maybe it was just some random shit. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't fucking know. But I grab it, pull it off the road. That's when I hear it. A car. Coming up behind me. I turn around fast, and there it is. A set of headlights in my rear view. I can't see the driver, but something about it doesn't sit right. The car's too close. It's like he's trying to ride my ass, like he's just waiting for me to move so he can push me off the road. I hurry up, get back in the car, and slam the door shut. My heart's still pounding, and I try to shake the feeling that someone's fucking with me. I start the engine, and the car behind me keeps pace. It's right there, like it's glued to my bumper. I can't get rid of it. I switch lanes, trying to shake the bastard off, but he's right there, parallel to me now. The headlights are blinding, and I can't even see his face. Just the silhouette of the car next to mine. The bastard's driving so close I can practically feel his breath on my neck. I can see the shadows in his window. The dude's just staring at me. His face is twisted in some weird-ass grin, and I can't figure out if he's laughing or if he's just fucking crazy. Either way, it's not helping my anxiety. I can't take it anymore. My palms are sweating, my heart's thumping like it's trying to punch its way out of my chest. Fuck it. I pull over. I need to face this shit. I need to know what the hell is going on. The car pulls up next to mine. I don't know why, but I get out. My legs are shaky, but I'm pissed now. I'm ready to fucking snap. I don't know if it's the fear or the adrenaline, but I'm done being chased. The silence was eerie. No sound except her ragged breathing and the distant hum of an engine. The headlights of the car behind her still haunted her, relentless like a fucking shadow. Her hand trembled as it gripped the handle, but out of spite or anger, maybe both, she yanked the door open and stepped out. "What the fuck do you want?" she shouted toward the unknown driver, her voice sounding steadier than she felt. The car stood still. No answer. Just those headlights slicing into her eyes and air that was too thick to breathe. At that moment, a thought flashed through her mind: why was this guy following her? What did he want? Then, thud. A door slamming shut. Her door. She turned so sharply she almost stumbled backward. The rear door of her car was wide open, and a shadow darted into the darkness. Someone had been inside. Inside her fucking car the whole time. No, 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 she muttered, stepping back, her legs giving way. Her gaze darted over the road, the woods beside it, but that someone, whoever or whatever it was, had vanished. The car behind her suddenly revved its engine and flicked on its high beams, as if trying to grab her attention. And now she understood. He hadn't been following her to hurt her. He'd been following her to warn her. Shit, she whispered, cold sweat dripping down her spine. Someone had been hiding behind her. In her car. If it hadn't been for the driver behind her, who knows what might have happened. She looked at the dark woods swallowing the figure that had disappeared, then back at the road where the other car's taillights were now fading into the distance. Whoever that driver was, they didn't stop for thanks. They didn't wait for questions. They just left. She shivered and wiped the sweat from her face, the night air suddenly colder than before. The truth hit her like a punch to the gut: sometimes the people chasing you aren't the ones you should fear, it's the ones you don't even know are there.